Hello and good evening from Faurot Field in Columbia, Missouri. The time is 8:15 p.m. Central. The Missouri Tigers survive one of the craziest, most mind-boggling roller coasters they have ever been a part of in recent memory. 30-27 in double overtime. Blake Craig makes the eventual winning field goal in double OT, and then Vanderbilt misses a kick wide left to seal the deal and give Missouri their fourth win to start the season. They enter the bye week with a record unblemished. But Adeen, as Coach Drink said in the press conference, their record might be unblemished, but their play on the field is far from it. I do want to start with the positives, though, because there were a lot amidst a sea of negatives. Adeen, I'll start with you. What are some of the positives you can extract from a game? Again, we'll get to the negatives in a little bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of what I noticed was it's a lot of copy paste from really last week. Lots of positives with the outside zone game. Really, I think executed that to a high level with Nate Noel, especially on the right side. I noticed, and Nate Noel did a great job of turning smaller plays and even bigger plays in this once he got to the second level, and proved to be yet again a great acquisition. I think that the offense did a good job with creatively getting the ball to Luther Burden, not throughout the course of the game, but definitely in the opening of the game and definitely at the end with the 25-yard touchdown in overtime and the 20-yard touchdown at the beginning of the game, which I thought was great play design. I think the defense did a great job holding up after those Blake Craig misses. Lots of defense. What would have been even more killer in those situations would be a big Vanderbilt drive right after those misses. But the defense did a pretty fantastic job of responding to those drives with 3 and outs and easing the pressure on the offense that would have grown more and more if those missed field goals ended up turning into points for the Commodores on the other end. I thought they did a good job with keeping their head on a swivel throughout the entirety of the game, responding to adversity. Again, although did they want to have adversity this week? Most likely not. Did they respond to it well? I have to say yes. And as a whole, the crowd tonight was a big factor, you have to say, with Vanderbilt missing those 2 field goals. And really just a solid performance from Mizzou, but yes, a lot of things to improve on. Don't underestimate this Vanderbilt team, but then again, you'd be hard-pressed to say that Missouri looked like a top 25 team in the country even today.
Yeah, absolutely. These Vanderbilt games have been very difficult since Mizzou joined the SEC in 2012. This is the 9th game since they started playing annually, again, in the last dozen years, where the game has been within 1 possession in the fourth quarter. And that is despite Vanderbilt and Mizzou as well, but mostly Vanderbilt going through a lot of years in the past decade plus 2 of being the worst team in the SEC. And I don't think they'll be that this year. I think the chance of that happening is far less than in years past. But these games have always been difficult for Mizzou, and this was arguably the most difficult win of the last 12 years. I want to circle back on a couple of things you touched on, Adeen. One is Nate Noel, 199 rushing yards. Somehow the encore was better than last week, where he cleared 100 pretty easily. Tonight, a 64-yard carry that Marcus Carroll eventually capitalized on the next play for a touchdown. But it was interesting hearing Nate Noel in the post-game press conference talk about how he's so familiar with the outside zone. He's so familiar with stretching the defense. He said he'd been running it for now 5 years, with his previous 4 being at Appalachian State. And he said a lot of his cuts especially were instinct-based. We saw tonight, yes, the offensive line created a lot of open running lanes. But even better for Mizzou, Nate Noel knows how to hit them. And he hit him hard tonight. Yeah. What did you think of his performance, and like how valuable he was, especially with another game of Mizzou's passing offense not being up to par with what I think they expect?
Oh yeah, I think he was absolutely huge. More importantly, I think I want to touch on one moment in the game where the offense was booed off the field after an untoward pass from Brady Cook on 3rd down. And I was actually writing on my story talking about how did Cook respond to the boost, but I think it was kind of an anticlimax in the sense that it was actually Nate Noel who responded to that with a 64-yard run that Quentin mentioned. And really, the big part of the offense's response was at the hands of Nate Noel. And yeah, like I said, proven to be a very valuable asset to this offense. He brings a lot of creativity, a lot of creative avenues for this offense to succeed with how quick he is and how not only how quick he is, because you see a lot of running backs in college football be very, very quick, but not know what to do with that speed. But Nate Noel is coming with, obviously, as Quentin said, 4 years of experience at Appalachian State, and in his 5th year here, he has the patience to really find the holes in the offense and really exploit them to make him a viable running back in the SEC. And I mean, he was the difference tonight. Brady Cook said it in the post-game presser. Without him, they don't win this game, and that is just a pure, cold, hard fact. And you really are intrigued to see what he can bring, especially on the road coming up, and what he can bring for his team for the rest of the season. And yeah, I think he was great.
And then another thing was special teams. More specifically, Blake Craig. Luke Bauer had another really solid game punting the ball. But Blake Craig, talked about a roller coaster going from SEC Player of the Week last week, going 4 for 4, including a 56-yarder to beat the buzzer at halftime, missing 3 kicks tonight. One of them looked like it might have been good over the right upright, but if you're Blake Craig, and Eli Drinkwood said it after the game, you'd rather not have to worry about it and put it closer to the middle of the upright, so there is no dispute at all.
Right.
Up and down kicking performance. Doink one off the right upright, missed that one right, and then missed another one very, very wide left. Now, Adeen, although he did end up kicking the game winner, how do you feel about the current kicking situation now that we have seen both the highs and the lows from Blake Craig?
You have to obviously it's 9 points left off the board, and I actually put this in the game where it was actually 188 yards that were nullified in this game from non-scoring drives, including a 91 play drive which had the kick off the upright, a 39-yard drive, and a 31-yard drive. And the most important thing really about the last 2 missed field goals is the field position that it gives to the other team. If you make those field goals, you're setting up for a kickoff, and you're most likely pinning them back to the 25-yard line. But when you miss goals like that, on another week against an offense that's more potent than Vanderbilt, which, although Vanderbilt's offense had a good day, there are plenty of offenses that are on Mizzou's schedule that fit that description. That is going to be unacceptable. The more encouraging thing, though, with Blake Craig is how he was able to put that away in a key moment in overtime and keep that the nightmare from getting even worse. And luckily, he'll be able to put this game away, and the result of the game is going to make it a lot easier for him to put away. And you also have to remember that this is a redshirt freshman playing in his first season. Lots of highs, lots of lows for a player like that, and this was about as good of a test as any for him as to how he can handle the pressure. And I think I liked a lot of what I heard from the players after the game about Blake Craig. A lot of them talked about just giving him a little bit of words of encouragement, but really just leaving him to himself, letting him do his own thing, not letting him get in his own mind. And eventually he did provide the winning kick for the Tigers, but yeah, he's got to be better.
Yeah, and we heard over the offseason Blake Craig's ability to be resilient, even in scrimmages. When he missed, I believe, a 51-yarder during Mizzou's last scrimmage, he bounced back and hit a couple more field goals, including another 50-plus yarder. And yeah, that's going to be huge. I don't think the leg has ever been a question, as we saw around this time last week. He can hit 56 yards easily. I saw him during warmups hit somewhere between 60 and 65 easily when it was raining. Like, that's a difficult kick to make. And he even hit a field goal. He hit a long field goal against the Wind tonight. And it kind of emulated, I think, his high school career, specifically his senior year, I believe. He went 17 of 24 his last year at Liberty, but he had a couple of 50-plus yarders to his name. So again, I think Mizzou would rather not have it be a roller coaster at kicker. Harrison Mevis had a few of these games where it was very evident he had the leg. It's just about getting the consistency down. All right. Now the negatives.
Yeah.
I'll take a deep breath. Adeen, I will start with arguably the most talked about one. Again, this is arguably because there were a lot. Game management.
Yeah.
Game management. It hadn't been an issue in a very long time. I'm thinking back to around this time last year The Kansas State game specifically at the end of the game, some of the late game mismanagement there.
Yeah.
The end of the first half, Eli Drinkwitz elects to go for it on 4th and short on his own side of the field, just shy of midfield. Brady Cook gets sacked, and then Brock Taylor makes a long field goal to end the half. I will just leave it at this. Adeen, what are your thoughts on the decision to go for it?
So the decision, obviously, Drink in the post-game presser just now beat himself up a lot about that decision. What I don't mind the decision. What I mind is the process that led to it. Was they were running off the clock, they were kind of hurrying up to the line. I think in that situation, that's a play where you want to take a timeout, and if you're going to make that decision, you want to drop a play that you feel really confident about. I don't like the idea of rushing into that play, giving Vanderbilt a time to really build up that adrenaline and just go at you in there. And that's what really led to that play there. It didn't look organized on that play. And in a play like that in midfield where if you don't make it, the other team, you're going to be putting up points on the board in the swing 8 that Drinkwitz talks about. Final 4 minutes of the first half and first 4 minutes of the second half. I don't like the decision. I think they had a chance to correct that decision later in the game. At the end of the fourth quarter, it was 4th and 1 at the 50-yard line. Lots of fans, probably would have liked to see them go for it. Lots of boos that came down for the decision to punt it. But Quentin talked about it with me while we were watching the game, that you have to really think that what occurred at the end of the second half kind of played in to what happened there at the end of the at the end of the regulation. Game management as a whole, though, for Drinkwitz, I think he could have better games. Those two glaring moments probably highlighted it. And you're always going to hear accountability from him, and I think that's the most important thing. And this bye week is a great opportunity for them to correct on it. And Drink said it's a great time for our bye week. So back to you, Quentin.
Yeah, no, that was it was definitely one of those situations. It makes me think of a behind the back pass in basketball. Think of a trick play in football. If it works, well, great. That was genius. That was awesome. But if it doesn't, it's one of those situations where the con is like a stab wound.
Yeah.
Almost. It is a very big deal. It allowed Vanderbilt to not only get points before half, but enter half with momentum. A lot of momentum that they ended up carrying into the second half. Unfortunately, could not sustain until the very, very end. Defense. There were some big plays. Very big defensive plays. The pass rush was overall pretty solid. Chris McClellan especially, I believe he had at least a couple of tackles for loss. Some big pass breakups off of pressure on Diego Pavia. But speaking of Diego Pavia, I think we all knew that there was a good chance many of us watching were not going to enjoy it, especially the people in the student section, the people in the crowd. Pavia had a big night rushing, definitely a different kind of quarterback than Thomas Castellanos. Unfortunately for Mizzou, one that they had a lot less success against than Thomas Castellanos. Adeen, I'll ask you, what do you think of Mizzou's defense against Diego Pavia? I guess both good and bad. That's something I don't think we explicitly mentioned, the positives. And it's funny I say that like we didn't talk about it less than 10 minutes ago. But I guess what are your thoughts on how Mizzou performed against Pavia, both the good and the bad?
I think the good was they had a few. Obviously, he had gained 119 yards today, lost 35, which means they weren't completely unsuccessful in putting him far back behind the line of scrimmage and creating negative plays for him. I think the bad was really they lost contain on him a few times because the goal was clearly to put pressure on him. On the 60-yard touchdown coverage bust at the beginning of the game, they tried to put pressure on him, and he beautifully stepped forward in the pocket and launched an absolute bomb, really. And I think the thing about Pavia that not many players in all of college football possess is just the mentality. In overtime, I believe it was, 2nd and 12 or something.
It was after the offensive pass interference call on Vanderbilt. It was. Oh no, that was a different play.
It was the roughing the passer.
It was the roughing the passer.
And they lost 6 yards. It was 2nd and 16. That's correct. And he hurdled a man en route to the 2-yard.
Yeah,
line.
It wasn't quite as destructive as what Taylon Green did earlier today to an Auburn defender, but it was still pretty gutsy, and it almost picked up a first down, made it 3rd and 1, and Vanderbilt eventually scored.
He's a player. He's just a player. He'll leave it all out on the field, and Mizzou knew that going into the game. And sometimes there's assignments that are going to be tough, and they end up, being tough. I think they did a great job in overtime, especially the second overtime, of not letting him beat them in key situations. You could have easily seen in a 3rd and 11 play where they had just gained 17 yards on 2nd and 28. See something happen, but it was actually batted down very well, and eliminated that issue, created obviously the ensuing missed field goal. But yeah, overall, if I were to grade it, probably a C on how they took on Diego Pavia. I think they allowed him to have too much of his way in the air.
Yeah, I think what makes Diego Pavia so annoying to defend from the opposition's perspective is that he isn't, I don't want to say not athletically gifted, because everyone that plays Division I football is athletically gifted.
Right.
But he is far from the Thomas Castellanos archetype, to where he has 99 percentile speed, to where if he breaks contain, sometimes you sit there and you're like, what could you have done?
Yeah.
What could you have done? To whereas Diego Pavia, he does not have that same top end speed.
Yeah.
Eli Drinkwitz said at Tiger Talk this past Tuesday, he thinks Pavia is a fullback that just so happens to play quarterback.
Yeah.
And that's the way he runs. He's willing to take a hit. He's willing to lower his shoulder. And there was a lot of plays tonight, as Adeen alluded to just a few seconds ago, where it looked like Mizzou had him.
Yeah.
Looked like Mizzou had contain on him. Eli Drinkwitz said in the post game that they had a spy on him most of the time. And he was always able to just find a way. And Clark Lee said it earlier this week, something along the lines of, if Diego Pavia has the ball in his hands, you're never out of the fight.
Yeah.
And because Diego Pavia had the ball in his hands, Vanderbilt was never out of the fight. And so I think I relatively agree with your assessment there, Dean, on Mizzou's ability to contain. They made big-time plays when it mattered most,
yeah,
which is the good thing for their sake. Offensively, rushing attack we already talked about, really, really good. Over the air, more struggles. Statistically, not bad. Not bad for Brady Cook. Did not turn the ball over. Definitely not one of his better games. I'd put it on the lower end of the totem pole in terms of games he has started and finished. I thought Vanderbilt was doing a pretty good job of taking away deep down the field stuff outside of the Luther Burden touchdown to start the second overtime. Adeen, what did you see out of the passing offense?
I think even the passing offense as a whole, I think it's the red zone that you really got to highlight. This team, and Drink talked about it post-game, they have to figure out what's going on in the red zone. They're not having the success rate that they had last season, which made this offense as feared as it was towards the latter stages of last season. And without the red zone and without explosive plays, they did not do well in the explosive plays department as a whole, and especially through the air. It needs to happen. It happened in overtime, and that was a great thing. But it was clearly a point of frustration for Drinkwitz that they could not really find anything in the red zone. And I think it has to, it's something that Kirby Moore can do better on with play design. It's something that Brady Cook can do better on with decision making. I think Brady Cook's decision making right now is a little bit flustered, and what it comes down to, we as spectators can't really know. We know as much as we see, but it's definitely something that is beyond what our eyes can see as far as what's going on in the red zone, and they're definitely going to have a lot of time to fix it. The passing game, though, it's just not enough efficiency, not enough response, not enough capitalizing of good field position, too. I think that was something, the first drive of the game and right after the missed field goal from Vanderbilt, they just didn't capitalize on good field position, which is something that good teams do. So as a whole, just got to boil it down to red zone struggles.
Yeah, and even with last year's red zone quote-unquote success, I've talked about this a lot in articles I've already posted on the websites, the main site. I think last year's red zone numbers were a little bit misleading on the surface. If you look at solely red zone efficiency, you'll see that Mizzou is in the top 5 at the very least, which on the surface is great. That means they're scoring once they get inside the 20. But red zone efficiency, in my opinion, is a flawed statistic. Red zone efficiency weighs touchdowns and field goals the same. It weighs it as 1 and 1, and American football does not work that way. Touchdowns are worth double than field goals. Mizzou could have hypothetically, if they attempted 50, they had 50 red zone opportunities, for example, they could have kicked field goals on all 50 of those red zone opportunities.
That's a perfect
Another team could have scored 50 touchdowns, and both Mizzou and that other team would have had the same red zone efficiency of 100. And Mizzou last year, only a couple of teams with a certain amount of attempts in the red zone, because Mizzou was in the red zone a lot, had a greater percentage of their red zone scores be field goals than Mizzou. Mizzou was kicking a lot of field goals when they got inside the 20, and that's an area of improvement. Coach Drink and a lot of the players had it tailed throughout the offseason and obviously into this season, including tonight. So I think that is a good point you bring up, Adeen, the red zone struggles, because they're great teams you cannot give more opportunities to. And Mizzou was being gifted those opportunities. They simply could not capitalize at the level of a AP top 10 team, a top 10 team, period. And so heading into the bye week, which Eli Drinkwitz and I think the rest of the players and those who watch would agree, comes at a really, really great time. Definitely a lot of screws to tighten. But Adeen, I guess heading into Texas A&M in a couple of weeks, what are some of the main areas that you want to see Mizzou improve in the most?
I think they have to improve in what we just mentioned, the red zone. I think one of the things you can attribute to that lack of success is not being able to extend plays in the red zone. A lot of big red zone touchdowns don't come from set plays, but really comes from a quarterback knowing how to extend a play, create disarray within a defense, and that thus creates an open man. I think additionally they have to be better at eliminating coverage busts. It just has to happen, because there was one that you mentioned with Quincy Skinner down the field who was open, and Pavia did not find him, thankfully, because of the pressure. But if he did, that we're probably talking about something else right now, and not talking about how lucky Mizzou is to get out of this game, but more so talking about how unfortunate it is that Mizzou's season is already on the downtrend to begin the year before the bye week. Additionally, they just have to improve, on the passing game. Got to have more deep balls. Got to have more explosive plays. And especially stick to the game plan. The game plan on defense was to get Vanderbilt out of their own game plan. And they were not able to do that because the offense was not able to go up by 2 scores and stop them from running the option. And if you are not able, that's what they say in football, is that good offense leads to even better defense. And if a game is close like that, then the opposing offense will have no problem sticking to their game plan. And you don't want to have them in that position. So as a whole, there's a lot to improve on, but also good things to take away. And just my final thing to say, great time for a bye week. Really, it just is. It just is.
So Mizzou again entering the bye week, still undefeated, 4-0. Next matchup, we will actually be seeing you next in College Station, Texas. The Rock M crew is headed down to the Lone Star State in a couple of weeks. Adeen's homeland. This young gentleman right next to me, and I say young gentleman as if we are not in the same year of school, hailing from Tomball, Texas. That's going to be sort of his backyard.
No love lost, though. We're ready.
Well, we'll catch you all again in College Station. If you have made it this far, go to bed right now. We appreciate you, but you need some sleep.
Yes.
Seriously, you've been through a lot, probably. So I'm Quentin Corpuel, that's Adeen Rao, signing off from Thoreau Field. Again, final score, Mizzou 30, Vanderbilt 27. In double overtime, the Tigers survive an upset. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcasts app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.